Sometimes, when you finally step back and go silent, you think it's over. You think that by walking away, you've lost them, that the avoidant has won. But the truth is, when you go no contact, something powerful happens that most people never understand. Avoidants, by nature, crave space. They pull back not always because they don't care, but because closeness feels like pressure. When you chase, they run. When you push, they hide. But when you stop, when you truly let go, something shifts inside them. That silence you create doesn't just disappear, it echoes. And in that echo, they start to feel what they've been avoiding all along, the weight of losing someone who cared deeply. You see, avoidants often live in a cycle of fear. They want love, but they fear being consumed by it, so they stay half in, half out. They think they can always come back, that you'll always be there waiting. But when you finally draw the line, when your silence says, "I'm done fighting for your attention," it forces them to face a reality they've been running from. That connection doesn't survive without effort. In your absence, they begin to notice what your presence brought: peace, warmth, understanding. At first, they may feel relief, but slowly that relief turns to reflection. Then reflection becomes regret, because what they secretly hoped for wasn't just your attention. It was your patience. They hoped you'd wait. They hoped you'd understand their silence. They hoped you'd still be there when they were ready. But growth happens when you stop being someone's emotional safety net. When you step back, you give both of you space to grow, and for them, that space becomes a mirror. A mirror that shows them what love looks like when it's not begging, what care looks like when it's no longer chasing. Your no contact isn't a punishment, it's power. It's the moment you say, "I love you enough to let you learn what you've lost." It's a boundary that whispers louder than any words ever could. And for the avoidant, it's a turning point. Because for the first time, they have to face a truth they've long avoided. Love doesn't wait forever, and silence can be the loudest goodbye of all. When you step into silence after giving everything you could, something powerful begins to happen. It's not just about disappearing or playing games, it's about creating space for truth to emerge. When you go no contact, you remove all noise, all chasing, all explanations. And in that stillness, the avoidant, the one who once pulled away or seemed indifferent, begins to feel the shift. Silence, though invisible, has a weight. It carries messages words could never express. It tells them that your energy, your effort, your presence are no longer guaranteed. Suddenly, what they once took for granted becomes something they can no longer feel. Avoidants often feel safest when they have distance. They tell themselves they need space, freedom, and time to think. But here's the irony: they only realize the value of closeness when it's gone. When you were texting, checking in, and trying to connect, they may have seen it as pressure. But when all that energy stops, they notice the emptiness it leaves behind. That silence begins to echo in the quiet corners of their life, in moments when they expect your message, and it doesn't come. When they scroll through their phone and find no new notification from you. It's in those moments they begin to ask questions they never did before. Did I lose something real? Why do I feel this emptiness now? You see, awareness rarely grows in noise, it grows in absence. It's when you remove your presence that someone truly sees how much space you occupied in their world. Avoidants often struggle with emotional recognition. They don't always understand feelings in real time. But silence has a way of slowing things down. Without the constant reassurance or communication, they begin to sit with their thoughts, and for many, that's the first time they actually feel the loss, not just think about it. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects back the consequences of their avoidance. It reveals what happens when someone takes love and effort for granted. And it's in that reflection that they start to develop awareness, not because you explained it 1,000 times, but because the absence itself becomes the teacher. The energy they once dismissed now becomes something they crave, and they realize that connection isn't something that just appears when convenient. It requires presence. It's important to understand that this awareness doesn't always come quickly. Avoidants may take time to recognize what they've lost because emotional processing isn't their strength, but your silence gives them the one thing they can't ignore: space to feel, and in that feeling, clarity begins to form. They start connecting dots: your laughter, your care, your patience, your understanding. They remember moments that once felt ordinary but now feel precious. That's the power of silence. It transforms memory into meaning. It turns your absence into a lesson, one that words could never deliver, because when you finally stop speaking, they finally start hearing. Avoidants live in a constant inner conflict. They crave closeness, yet fear it at the same time. Deep down, they want to love and be loved. They want connection, warmth, and emotional safety. But the moment someone gets too close, an invisible alarm goes off inside them. That alarm whispers, "You're losing control. You're being consumed. You're not safe." It's not that they don't feel love. In fact, they often feel it deeply, but love triggers their deepest fears. They associate intimacy with danger, as if being emotionally open will lead to pain, rejection, or loss of self. So even when their heart wants to move closer, their mind pulls them back. This push-pull dance creates confusion for both sides. You try to give more love, thinking it will bring them closer, but they interpret it as pressure. They start to withdraw, not because they don't care, but because vulnerability feels overwhelming. For avoidance, independence becomes a form of protection. They believe that by keeping emotional distance, they can stay in control. But ironically, this same defense ends up isolating them from the connection they secretly long for. They want love that feels safe, love that doesn't demand, chase, or corner them. They want someone who can meet them with understanding, but they rarely communicate what they need. Instead, they retreat, hoping you'll understand their silence without taking it personally. Inside, avoidants often wrestle with guilt. They know they're pushing away something good, but they can't always stop themselves. When love feels too close, it activates their survival instinct, the same instinct that tells them closeness equals loss of autonomy. So they pull back, needing space to breathe. Yet in that space, they miss the very person they distanced themselves from. That's the painful irony. They run from love to protect themselves from pain, only to create a new kind of loneliness. When you go no contact or stop chasing, they don't immediately celebrate. There's a part of them that feels relieved. The pressure is gone, and they can breathe again. But relief soon turns into reflection. They start wondering why they feel uneasy, why your absence doesn't feel as freeing as they thought it would. Slowly, they realize that their need for space isn't as fulfilling as the comfort of being seen, understood, and valued. That's when the craving for connection begins to resurface. Avoidants crave a love that feels calm, not chaotic. They hope for someone who can love them without losing themselves. But the truth is, until they face their own fears, no love will ever feel completely safe. The connection they crave requires them to open up, to trust, and to risk vulnerability, all the things they've spent their lives avoiding. Only when they begin to see that closeness isn't confinement, but collaboration, do they start to move toward the intimacy they've always desired but never allowed themselves to fully embrace. When you go no contact, something profound happens, not just between you and the avoidant, but within them. Your silence becomes more than just a pause. It becomes a mirror. For someone who has spent their life running from emotional discomfort, that mirror can be confronting. Avoidants are skilled at distraction. They stay busy, logical, or emotionally distant to avoid feeling vulnerable. But when your presence is gone, they lose the buffer that allowed them to escape those feelings. Your absence forces them to sit with what they've been avoiding, their own role in the disconnection. For the first time, they are left alone with their thoughts, and the quiet begins to stir something deeper. At first, they may tell themselves they're fine. They may even feel a temporary relief. The pressure is gone. The emotional intensity has faded. But as the days go on, that relief turns hollow. The silence grows louder. They start remembering your words, your warmth, the moments when you reached out and tried to connect. Those memories, once brushed aside, now return with new meaning. Your silence becomes a reflection of their choices, and through it, they begin to see the consequences of their avoidance. Avoidants often believe that emotional distance keeps them safe. They convince themselves that staying detached protects them from disappointment. But when you remove yourself completely, they begin to see that safety without connection isn't peace, it's emptiness. The silence becomes uncomfortable because it exposes what they've lost. It shows them that independence without intimacy can feel cold, and control without closeness can feel lonely. In that mirror, they see a version of themselves they rarely acknowledge, the one who pushed away something genuine. They start to understand that every ignored message, every withdrawn moment, wasn't just protecting them. It was building a wall between them and love. And when no one is left on the other side of that wall, they finally see how high and isolating it's become. The no-contact space forces them to take accountability in a way words never could. Because you're no longer explaining, defending, or reaching out, they're left to interpret the silence on their own. And that silence holds them accountable in the most powerful way. It doesn't argue, it doesn't chase, it simply reflects. Eventually, that reflection sparks awareness. They start asking themselves why they felt the need to run, why affection felt heavy, why someone's care made them uncomfortable. This kind of self-questioning doesn't happen when you're still there trying to fix things. It happens when you step away. Your absence becomes the catalyst for their emotional awakening. And though they may not admit it right away, your silence teaches them something no conversation ever could. That love is not endless, and when they keep turning away, eventually, there's no one left to turn back to. Deep down, avoidants carry a quiet hope, a hope that even if they pull away, you'll still be there. It's a part of their emotional wiring, shaped by fear and uncertainty. They want connection, but they want it on their terms. So, when they create distance, they secretly expect the bond to survive it. They believe that love means understanding their silence, waiting through their absence, and forgiving their emotional withdrawal. This isn't manipulation in the traditional sense. It's a coping mechanism. Avoidants fear being consumed or losing their independence, yet they also fear being abandoned. So, they build a reality where they can disappear and still feel safe knowing you'll remain. When you go no contact, this hidden expectation gets tested. At first, they might convince themselves that you'll reach out again, that your silence is temporary. They may check their phone, scroll through old conversations, or replay moments when you reassured them, thinking they'll come back. They always do. That thought brings them comfort because it allows them to avoid facing the deeper truth that relationships don't thrive on one-sided effort. But as the silence continues, that illusion begins to crack. The longer they don't hear from you, the more uneasy they become. The belief that you'd always be there starts to feel uncertain, and that uncertainty stirs something they rarely confront, the realization that people, even the most patient ones, eventually stop waiting. For an avoidant, love often feels like a paradox. They want to be wanted, but they resist being needed. They long for reassurance but reject vulnerability. So, when they distance themselves, they're not always trying to end the connection. Sometimes they're trying to control it. They want to feel close enough to know they're valued, but far enough to feel safe. They hope you'll understand their silence as a sign of needing space, not rejection. They hope you'll read their distance as emotional overwhelm, not disinterest. But when you stop chasing and stop filling the silence, they're forced to confront a reality that feels both foreign and painful, that love doesn't wait unconditionally. Slowly, this realization starts to unravel their assumptions. They begin to see that emotional safety isn't found in having someone who endlessly forgives their distance, but in learning to stay present despite discomfort. Your silence becomes a lesson not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. It shows them that connection isn't a guarantee, it's a choice that must be made every day. When they finally recognize that your patience has limits, they start to understand what love truly requires: participation, vulnerability, and presence. That awareness doesn't come easily, but it's often the turning point for avoidance. Because the moment they realize you may never come back, the hope that once comforted them becomes the wake-up call that reminds them love isn't about waiting, it's about showing up. Letting go is one of the most powerful forms of love, though it rarely feels that way in the beginning. When you decide to stop chasing someone who constantly pulls away, it can feel like defeat. You might wonder if you've given up too soon, if they'll ever realize what they lost, or if silence will only widen the distance. But in truth, letting go is not surrender, it's strength. It's the moment you choose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over waiting for someone who isn't ready to meet you halfway. For avoidants, this is the moment they never expect. They grow accustomed to being pursued, reassured, forgiven. So when that pattern breaks, when you step back with calmness instead of confrontation, it creates a shift that they cannot ignore. Avoidants often confuse love with pressure. The more someone tries to connect, the more they feel trapped. But when that energy stops, when you finally withdraw without resentment, they experience something they've never felt before: the true impact of your absence. It's not about silence as punishment, it's about silence as a boundary. By walking away, you're no longer feeding the dynamic that kept you both stuck, the one where you chase and they retreat. You're saying, without words, that love should not feel like constant proving. Your decision to let go teaches them something they've never been forced to learn: that affection, loyalty, and emotional safety are choices, not entitlements. When someone chooses to stay, it's a privilege. When they stop, it's a signal that something must change. For the avoidant, this is where growth begins. They start realizing that independence doesn't mean isolation, and that connection doesn't have to threaten their freedom. Your boundary becomes their mirror. In your quiet strength, they see what partnership truly looks like: not dependency, but mutual effort. Letting go also brings healing to you. It frees your heart from the cycle of waiting, explaining, and hoping. It gives you the space to remember your worth, that love should feel steady, reciprocal, and nurturing. When you reclaim your energy, you shift the dynamic completely. You're no longer trying to earn love, you're allowing it to meet you. And that energy, though silent, is powerful. It tells the avoidant that love doesn't beg, it doesn't chase. It simply stands firm and moves forward when it's not met. In time, this strength becomes undeniable. Whether or not they return, the message is clear: you cannot build love alone. You've given them the opportunity to face their own patterns and to understand that real connection can't survive on one person's effort. By letting go, you give both of you a chance to grow, you in self-worth, them in accountability, and that's the quiet power of release. It doesn't just free you, it teaches them what love truly costs when taken for granted. In the end, remember that silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. Walking away from someone who can't meet you emotionally isn't about punishing them, it's about protecting your peace. When you stop chasing, you teach both yourself and the avoidant that love is a choice, not a chase. Growth happens in the space where you honor your worth and allow others to face their truth. Thank you for listening, for valuing your heart, and for choosing strength over struggle, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all.